J.K. Rowling, Part 5, Narcissist. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. We continue our examination of the evidence to make a determination as to what J.K. Rowling is. Is she a narcissist? Is she narcissistic but not a narcissist? Might she be a normal or an empath? We've looked at various facets of her life so far, much of which has proven interesting and provided us with a variety of different indicators from which we might start to draw some conclusions. Now we're going to turn to another important aspect of her life, her relationship with her children. We've examined her relationship with her mother, father, and sister. We've also looked at her romantic relationships. But what about her relationships with her children? Looking at the relationship between the subject and their children is invariably instructive. Are the children, for example, kept away? Is there privacy in relation to them? Do we know very little about them other than their existence? This could, of course, be a very controlling response of a narcissist, or it might simply be that the individual has emotional empathy for their children and doesn't want them exposed to the glare of publicity, especially where the subject is a famous person. Do we hear anything from the children? Do they speak out? Do they talk about the nature of their relationship with the subject? And what is the nature of that relationship? If there is silence, what might we draw from that silence? Well, in respect of J.K. Rowling, she has 3 children from 2 different men. Her firstborn is Jessica Isabel Rowling Orantes. She was born on the 27th of July 1993 and therefore is now in her 30s. She spent her childhood in the early emerging period of her mother's popularity. She studied philosophy at the University of Exeter and has taken up various charitable works. She has never spoken about the relationship that she has with her mother, and there is no negative information that has been shared by her in that respect. Her second child that she had with the good doctor, Neil Murray, is called David Gordon Rowling Murray. He was born on April the 24th, 2003. Similarly, very little is known about him. He is being kept away from public scrutiny. Could that be interpreted as a narcissist wanting to ensure that they have the control over the child, or is this an empathic act of protection, protecting the child from the scrutiny that comes with having a famous mother? Similarly, her third child, Mackenzie Jean Rowling Murray, who was born in 2005, little is known about her. None of the children have spoken adversely about their mother, despite all of them now being adults, and therefore it would seem reasonable to infer from that there was nothing out of the ordinary in relation to their childhoods, other than having a famous and wealthy mother, but that there was no controlling behaviours, no abuse, no objectionable conduct that took place. It can be, of course, the case with particular narcissists that the facade is so tightly wound around family members that they are prevented from speaking out even where there is problematic behaviour. But we could also consider and look at this in the context of what else has been shown in relation to J.K. Rowling's behaviour to recognise that it may well mean that they had healthy upbringings with a mother that cared for them and provided them with emotional stability and support. We also gain further insight from looking at some of the early years in relation to her relationship and how she dealt with her elder daughter concerning the challenges that J.K. Rowling faced in those early years, in the early 90s, not long after her daughter was born. Rowling once stated, "I never expected to mess up so badly that I would find myself in an unheated, mouse-infested flat looking after my daughter, and I was angry because I felt I was letting her down. Are these the words of an empathic mother, concerned for her daughter and her upbringing, or might it be a narcissist offering a facade to whoever she's speaking to portray her as caring when there might be evidence to the contrary? When J.K. Rowling left Portugal and her abusive husband behind, she had no one to turn to. Her father had remarried Janet Gallivan, his secretary, and relations were strained. But her sister had recently married, and she opened her door to Joanne. Despite her sister's hospitality, the next few years were to be Rowling's nadir. Although never quite as bad as the press has painted in terms of poverty, she always had food and clothes, heat and light. Rowling did endure a deep depression brought about by circumstance and frustration. For the first few weeks, Rowling and her daughter stayed with her sister Diane and brother-in-law Roger Moore in their home in Marshmont Road, but it was an arrangement that didn't last and couldn't last indefinitely. A small flat at 28 Gardens Crescent was organised by social services, and so began Rowling's experience of government bureaucracy, as she was forced to fill in endless forms and attend demeaning interviews in order to seek a weekly allowance of just £69. The new year brought with it a new flat, but her depression deepened. Shortly after her return to Britain, her old friend Sean Harris had offered to lend her money, but she refused. By midwinter, she was so unhappy in Gardens Crescent that she changed her mind and borrowed £600 from him to use as a deposit on a rented flat. Finding a flat was more difficult than she thought. It was only after enduring rejection after rejection from owners unwilling to rent to an unemployed single mother that she secured the keys to a flat in South Lawn Place. It was a 4-storey flat, furnished thanks to contribution from friends. It was here that she was overcome by a feeling of hopelessness. Her despair was compounded by the arrival in March 1994 of her estranged husband in search of his wife and daughter. Since her departure from Porto, Orantes had succumbed to drug abuse, and his wife was so concerned for the safety of her and her daughter that she was forced to obtain a restraining order that prevented Orantes from molesting, abusing her verbally, threatening her, or putting her in a state of fear and alarm by using violence towards her anywhere within the sheriffdom of Edinburgh. Again, this is demonstrative of the unpleasant nature of Orantes, and also shows the protective nature of Rowling in relation to this provocation. Orantes returned to Portugal, and Rowling filed for divorce in August 1994. The sense that she was failing her daughter was unbearable to Rowling. Is this as a consequence of her emotional empathy for her child, or might this be the narcissistic sense of pride making an appearance? Remember, the narcissistic sense of pride is also applicable to non-narcissists too. Whenever she visited the homes of other mothers, Rowling gazed covetously at their children's bright bundles of toys. Her own daughter's toys could fit comfortably into a shoebox. Yet when an insensitive, if well-meaning health visitor brought around a raggedy teddy bear and a small plastic phone, she binned them in a fit of shame. Was this a response to a threat to control by someone providing gifts which highlighted how she was failing as a mother, or was it simple, genuine shame out of what she perceived as her failings? Only after a period of counselling was she able to tackle her depression and begin writing again. But once she did, it was the writing that elevated her self-worth. The first 3 chapters of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone had made her sister laugh, a reaction that kindled hope in Rowling. In the long evenings at home with little else to do, she set about working on further chapters. In the mythology of J.K. Rowling, Nicholson's restaurant is where the majority of Harry Potter was written. Yet the brightly coloured restaurant has now gone, long since replaced by a Chinese restaurant. Rowling went to Nicholson's either as a respite from a freezing flat, or through a passion for good coffee, depending on which version you believe. Nicholson's was scarcely convenient, half a mile from her flat and at the top of 20 steps, quite a hike for a mother with a young child in a pushchair, but it was owned by her brother-in-law, which allowed her to draw out a single coffee over a few hours. A second establishment she visited regularly was the Elephant House on George IV Bridge, whose much patronised back room has windows overlooking Greyfriars Cemetery. A sign at the entrance now reads, "Experience the same atmosphere that J.K. Rowling did as she mulled over a coffee, writing the first Harry Potter novel." The writing of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone was slow. Rowling wrote in longhand, then typed up the finished work on a second-hand manual typewriter. In the meantime, she needed a job. At first she took on secretarial work for a few hours each week, but a full-time job was a necessity. She wanted a career, not just a means to make money, and so applied to study for a postgraduate certificate of education in modern languages at Moray House, now part of Edinburgh University. A small grant was supplemented by a generous friend, and in August 1995 she became a student once again. Staff at St David's High School on Dalkeith Road and Leith Academy, where she taught as part of her teacher training, remember her as keen and well organised. She graduated in 1996, around which time she heard the news that Harry Potter was to be published at last. The purest, most unalloyed joy was when I finally knew it was going to be a book, a real book you could see sitting on a shelf of a bookshop, she said. Whilst little is known about the children, it's demonstrative that finding herself in very difficult circumstances, she continued to persevere with her writing, that she sought to undertake fresh studies, that she didn't fall on self-pity, was reluctant to accept help from others, all of which tends to militate against her operating with a sense of entitlement, and it also demonstrates a sense of accountability towards looking after her daughter. More factors which arise from the life of J.K. Rowling, and then we're going to move on to another area in part 6, addressing the controversies in her life, in particular the ongoing battle that she has with the trans community. What will that tell us about J.K. Rowling? Join me in part 6.